Danielle Tantone, congratulations on your book, Piece of Work. This is a really personal memoir. It was a pleasure to support you in putting your heart and really creating something so many women are going to resonate with. How does it feel for you to have such a personal memoir out into the world?
It feels amazing and also very scary. And even when I'm recommending it to people, it's like, wait, is this appropriate? I mean, this is the cover.
Beautiful.
Um, my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, wanted to bring one to her. We just ordered a shipment of hard copies, and she wanted to bring one to her teacher, her first grade teacher. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is this appropriate for your first grade teacher to read about your mom? But the response has really been amazing. I mean, people are really resonating with it, and they're really getting the point of it, and not just focused on the the me and the sports bra. So
But yeah, we've survived COVID. I think a first grade teacher can handle it at this point. But yes, exactly. Tell us more about the point of it and why you wrote it. Tell us what's in the book.
well, originally when I started writing this book 15 years ago or so, it was a memoir about my faith journey. I was raised Jewish and became a Christian later in life, in my late 20s. And it was kind of a story about that. Like, how does a Jewish girl from Scottsdale become a Christian, a born again Christian? Um, and went from a very kind of liberal mindset to more of a conservative mindset. And that was a good story in and of itself. And then some things happened. Um, Life went on, and I was dealing with some different struggles that I have personally. And I ended up making some choices that were pretty unfortunate. And I was like, well, what the heck? I am pretty much a failure as a Christian. So now what? Now what's the story about? Infidelity, divorce, that doesn't fit in. That's not the kind of person I want to be. And I can't erase those chapters. And then I became a nurse through the pandemic, and then I was really felt like I was wobbling between two worldviews during the pandemic. And it became a story about what I ultimately realized was that we are all a piece of work. Like, we're all a mess, but we're also all a work in progress and a work of art all at the same time. And I found myself saying that phrase. I liked the resonance of the word work used in that phrase so many different ways. And I realized that is like a motto for my life and a motto for my book. And then, speaking to a friend, I realized that's a good title for the book. And that's the point of it, is that yes, I made some really stupid choices, but kind of it all worked together, and here I am.
And I
Making
love the de-escalation in a certain sense. It's an exciting book. It's a personal book, and it has so many issues in it that we all relate to. You've been through a health journey. There's information about infidelity, and there's your story of infidelity in this book.
Mhm.
And I think Piece of Work is so perfect because we live in a polarized world. We've been through a lot in the past couple of years, and that's what I've loved about you and your work since we met years ago, is that you can see this from multiple perspectives, have like coming from different faiths and having dual perspectives on that, being a nurse during
I've
the
been a registered
pandemic.
Republican. I've been a registered Democrat. I'm currently independent. I yeah, I was becoming a nurse during the pandemic, holding the hands of dying patients while friends on social media, wanted to just say the whole thing was a crock. And then my family wouldn't even get together with me in person because I worked in the hospital and I was dirty. And it was like I was in the middle of so many different perspectives, and I could understand and see them all so clearly, and nobody else could see what the other person saw, and I felt so in the middle. So yes, thank you for that.
And that's why I loved supporting you on this book, because we need to hear it and you needed to get it out into the world. I remember, our conversations that we were having just a year ago or so, and it's like, oh my goodness, like I want to know what you know.
You told me I said, I feel so in the middle. And you said, oh, you said something that really resonated with me. You said, you're the most in the middle person I know. Because that's exactly how I felt. It was just, um, and it was hard to be in the middle. But ultimately, I think the middle is the key to all the world problems that we have right now. And unfortunately, so many people are so far from the middle on both sides right now.
Absolutely. And that's where the honesty, the authenticity, and just accepting ourselves for the pieces of work that we are, nobody's perfect, is really beautiful. And so, of course, because you're sharing these personal stories, people have fears, people have obstacles. And I think this is really poignant and can help a lot of people who are working on their memoirs right now. What fears and obstacles came up as you were writing?
Well, there were many, and that's one of the reasons why it took 15 years to write. Partially, I mean, there's the whole story about my own infidelity. I mean, I don't, go into like, it's not a pornographic story or anything. I don't go into that kind of detail, but I go into detail about the feelings and the emotions that I was having during that time, and kind of followed myself on that journey and really delve into it. People are like, wow, you really went there. And that was
Mhm.
so refreshing and honest. But there was a lot of fear at first. When I first started writing it, I was, you know, part of a church, and still married to my ex-husband. And there was just like, you can't write a book about that. You can't. So I struggled with, how should I maybe write this as a novel instead and just kind of use a little bit of my true experience, or should I actually make it a memoir and make it a true story? So that was one thing. Then my ex himself, making sure that he was going to be okay with it. His family, I was worried about what, you know, what they would think,
They'd
what
say
if
what
they,
they would think.
legally even, like, in then I was worried about my own family, my daughters. I have three daughters, and my mom reading this, and my cousin, all my mom's cousins. And what's been really interesting is, first of all, my ex did read a draft and kind of gave me his blessing in not so many words, but basically said, do with it what you want. I think I was successful in just keeping him. Really, I threw if I threw anyone under the bus, it was myself. So I think anybody, he was like, okay, if you want to publish that, go right ahead. Um, uh, and to me, it's actually a love letter to even the people that I don't, that I destroyed relationships with, that my ex and his family. If they ever read it, I think they'll find how much love I really did and still do have for them. So anyway, going off on a tangent, but all those were my biggest fears. Obviously, as far as obstacles, beyond just the fears of, what will people think when they read this story about how I cheated on my husband. Of course, that's not all there is to the story. There's a lot of beautiful things in there.
Yeah.
But the other obstacles are just time. I mean, I am probably one of the busiest people that most people know. Also, I decided to go through nursing school in my 40s. I have three children. I've, had a mortgage and a husband and a very busy life. But this was like a burning desire. I had to write this book. And even I had ideas for other books or other projects. And this one was just in my heart. I couldn't not do it. So in the back, between over the years, while I was doing all these other things, having ideas for online businesses and jobs and all these things, I had this book. I just kept working on it. There were multiple drafts, multiple iterations of it, multiple different audiences in mind. And last year, it was in 2021, I believe, that you and I got serious. I called you. We had connected, and yeah, and I called you and I said, okay, this is the year I am going to actually write this book. Can you help me? And I hired you as my book coach, and you were amazing at just helping me take all of these, because I had written in journals and rough drafts over many years, and you like read all these pages that I had written and helped me kind of formulate it and find the themes, pull the threads, and turn it into something coherent and with a meaning and a purpose. Um, your meaning
Thank
matters.
you. And one thing I really want to highlight is the beauty of, you talk about the reasons and you talk about your emotional roller coaster as you were going through all of this. And so there, you just said, you gave us so much. And so I want to go back to the beginning, because of course you had fears, because you were honest. And I love how you said, if I threw anybody under the bus, it was myself. And I think one of the motives is to just be authentic and be honest and explain your story and be, seen in all the beauty and all the difficulty and all the complications, etc. And that's what makes it such a powerful memoir. And so I think it's beautiful. And I just want to highlight that, because of course there are different kinds of memoirs in this world, and where we can really reflect on ourselves and be authentic and be honest. And that's when people resonate. And the vulnerability is really powerful. And then also, you were a nurse during the pandemic. There are chapters during that period in this also. And so you spoke about it briefly, but I know people who are writing memoirs right now. There are two things that I imagine are big struggles as they write them. I know, because I talk to them every day. But one is, we worry what other people will think when we're honest. And so I'm going to pause there for a second, because the first thing you came into this interview with is, I was so amazed by the reception. My daughter wants to give it to her first grade teacher,
Well,
and
of course
so
she hasn't read it. She's 6, but the reception from even relatives, like, cousins who have read it. And I'm like, at first when they're like, "Oh, I bought your book," I'm like, "Oh, you did?" Like, I'm like, it's like, I want you to read it, but oh my gosh, do I really want you to read this about me? It's like embarrassing, because it really is, a very authentic story. And every single one of them has said things like, "Wow, what an honest and refreshing story. I learned so much about you and your family." Like, no one really even focused on the stuff I was most worried about, but every single person is like, I mean, the reviews and things, I should have them pulled up, but it's been really amazing. People are sending me texts, cousins, friends, just very, very positive. I haven't had any negative feedback. Of course, maybe they're thinking it and just haven't said it. Actually, one of the first people who read it was my mother-in-law, and she did say, "Are you sure you want to publish that? You really throw yourself under the bus." And I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm a different, that's," she said, "Piece of work. I don't like the title. That's very negative. It has a negative connotation." I'm like, that is the point. Like, that's the
that's the
point.
irony. Exactly.
But yeah, it's what I decided to do, because like I said, I had many different ways I thought of writing this story. And I decided to just go back. It's written in present tense from my perspective as I was going through it. And I think that makes it read a little bit like a movie or a Netflix special. And really, people are right there in the experience with me. And I think that is really a neat way to do it, because it has some religious themes. It has some, you know, just different themes. And I think that was a way to be, it's not too religious by doing it that way.
Spiritual. Yeah.
It's not to anything. It's more just like kind of going through it, the emotions from my perspective. And I think that's I'm excited that I was able to do that in a way that people are saying it's a page turner, which is amazing. Like, that's something I
Yes.
is like interesting enough.
I know it's a
It's
page
a story
turner.
about my life and it's a page turner. Like, how could my
Your
life
life
be
has been a page turner.
turner?
Yeah. And it's so important what you just said, because I think that's a light at the end of the tunnel for all of us who are grappling with, what are people going to think? What are people going to say? Believe me, whatever you're worried about, it really, a lot of times it provokes conversations. It brings us closer. It doesn't push us apart. Like, in so many instances, that's what I've noticed. And then one other light at the end of the tunnel I want you to plant for all of us who who are still in our books, I'm always in some book
Mhm.
or another. How
Mhm.
do you find the time? Just what advice do you have for anyone who is just, I love what you said is you about how you were so compelled to write it, and now here it is published and out there. Anything that happens from here is built upon this foundation, which is wonderful. But what advice do you have for all of us who are writing right now?
Well, first, before I say the advice about the time management piece, I want to give advice about just the worry about what to put in there and what will people think. My best advice is to just put it all out there. Be
Mhm.
completely authentically honest when you're first writing your drafts, and then later you can always decide to take something out. But I found just by being just throwing it all in there and not worrying so much about what people will think, but really telling the authentic story is the best way to do it. Later you can, confer with people about whether you might need to take something out or might need to make adjustments to that, but be really honest. Don't edit yourself as you're going.
Don't suppress your voice. Awesome.
Exactly. That's a good way to say it. Because as I'm saying that, I do actually edit as I'm going. That's my style. I was a journalism major, and I do a lot of like kind of line editing as I'm going. I like it. I like to read it out loud and see how it flows. As far as the writing, I mean, I did it over so much time, but when I really got serious about putting it together as a book and, getting it to something that would be publishable, I first of all, you make time for what's important to you.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've heard that. I'm sure you've heard of it. That analogy about where you have like a vase, a glass bowl, and you have to put the big rocks in first, and then you can put the pebbles in the water and everything else. If you don't put the big rocks in first, they're not going to fit. So the way to make it fit for me was to just wake up really early, do it before I did anything else. And I tend to be an early riser anyway, and thankfully I have family. Most of my family is like late sleeper, so there sometimes would be 4 or 5 hours in the morning on a weekend or something where I was up and nobody else was up. So that's one thing. And I also had to say no to a lot of things. Like I used to run marathons. I used to, a lot of those things would take up my early morning hours, and I had to be really diligent. I had to say, what's the highest and best use of my time in this moment? What is most important? And so, but I really did it most of the active kind of writing, like book writing, book putting together during the summer, last summer. I guess I wrote the draft in the first couple months of the year. That's when we started working together in January, February, March. But then I had like a completed draft over the summer that I was like editing and kind of putting together, um, like June, July, August. And I wasn't in school. I was in nursing school, but I was off school. So I would literally sometimes spend entire days. I was like, this is my job. I'm considering this my job right now. And I still had other jobs that I was doing on the side. It wasn't like my full-time job, but thankfully I had stretches of time, and that was important to be able to really put it together. But you can do it even with a full-time job or 3 full-time jobs
You
or
have
3.
to make it a big rock. Yes, I love that metaphor because it's so true. If you just fill up a jar with little things in your life, little grains of sand, you can fill up that whole jar with little tiny tasks. But as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you make your book a big rock and you put it in first and then put the little tasks on top of it, as I say, you can always wash the dishes faster. It's not like you don't get
Mm-hmm.
them done. You just do them a little faster and everything still happens. And so I love the big rock metaphor. I think that's perfect. And so now that piece of work is out there, my final question for you is, what is it like to have it published? What was most surprising about publishing and launching your book?
So many things were surprising, and it was such a journey. It still is. I mean, really. So the timing of it for me, like I said, I just graduated from nursing school. I just started a new job as a nurse, and I still am doing all these other things that I was already doing on the side, and I have 3 kids. And I had made a decision to self-publish. I sent some queries to agents, and I considered hybrid publishing, and I looked into a lot of different things, and I ended up finding a company that helped me to self-publish. And even that was a very excruciatingly painful journey. Like every stage, it's, you're always jumping through hoops. It's not easy, but
To birth
I
a book.
decided, yeah, I decided to just every time I'm faced with an obstacle, I just take a breath and I'm like, okay, what do we do? And I decided to just follow my own instincts and rhythm instead of worrying. I ended up not even doing a launch. You're supposed to do this big launch thing and lead up to thing. I mean, I mentioned on social media that I was working on this book. I'd sometimes post excerpts, and there was some buzz around this book coming, and lots of people said, I can't wait to read your book. But that's it. I didn't have my email list set up. I didn't do any of the things that you're supposed to do. I just decided, you know what? I am just going to publish it and I'm going to see what happens. And so I do have a pretty engaged personal Facebook um, uh, group of friends. So I posted a couple posts and people were like, okay, I'm going to buy it. I priced it pretty low for the ebook. I did do a little bit of a pre-sale. And what most surprised me was that I managed, because the truth is I didn't do completely nothing. I did do some research on how to choose keywords. I talked to you about it, categories and things like that. You can pick 2 categories, and somehow I thought, it's October. I did have breast cancer. There is a picture of me, this is a cancer reference, and the book's not really about breast cancer, but it is in there. And so I picked breast cancer as one of my categories. And it was in October, which was breast cancer awareness month. And that ended up really being a smart move. It was the #1 new release in breast cancer of all books on Kindle. And the reality is, maybe I've sold 100 or 200 books so far. It's not like I've sold thousands and thousands of books, but it's only been available for about a month. And considering that I've had a full-time job and several side gigs and 3 kids and all of that, and I haven't really done much to launch it, I'm pretty excited about that, because I feel like this is just the beginning. You can do it backwards. Like, you don't have to have all these things in place and then publish. You can always just publish it, and just little by little, I'm reaching out to influencers, small and large, little interviews like this.
And it's
I'm getting the
fun.
word out, and people are starting to read it. People who don't know me, so far it's been mostly just friends and family, but little by little, other people are finding it, and that's okay. I'm not going to be able to quit my job anytime soon, but this is exciting that my words are out in the world and they're resonating with people and they're making a difference in people's lives. Like, that is just amazing to me, that before last month, nobody had knew my story, and now all these people do, and they're changed by it. It's important and it's meaningful to them. And that is just mind-blowing and amazing. That's the best thing I've ever done. Honestly, like, besides my 3 kids, this is the best thing I've ever done. So
Extremely, extremely inspiring. Your life is a page turner. You've been through a lot, and now you've sold a couple hundred copies. Congratulations. And I feel like I've resonated with you so much. I mentioned once that when I'm a book coach, and when I published my book, my first book, the first version of this book in 2018, I was a full-time teacher. I was working so hard. I didn't have a chance to do anything either, but it's the foundation of everything. And yes, exactly. The possibilities, the pride, the discovery. It's a really inspiring story. And I am so glad you brought it into the world. Congratulations, Danielle. All the links are below. And yes, let's move this book.
Thank you, Emily. And thank you so much for everything that you did to make this a reality. I do want to add that one of the best ways to hear my story, read my story, is through the audiobook, which was just last week became available. It's me telling my story, reading, and people have said that I'm a decent audiobook narrator. They said maybe I missed my calling. So who knows? Maybe I'll do more.
Then you can narrate mine. Thank you.
I would love to. Although I think you would be pretty good yourself. It's pretty fun. It's not easy. Thankfully, I have a friend who owns a sound studio, and I stood there for hours while I'd have to redo. So, you know, if you can't do all those things that we do normally. We slur our words, and it's amazing how much you do
Exactly.
that when you're being recorded for 8 hours at a time. But it was very, very, very cool. And I think it's a good way to really hear the emotion and the story as told by me. So
I haven't heard it yet. I am so excited to get the audiobook.
it's on
Everybody
Audible,
grab
so you can use your Audible credits. Even if you don't have Audible, you can do a free trial and use it to buy my book. Piece of work.
beautiful,
Danielle
beautiful.
Thompson.
Piece of work. Congratulations. We've all been through a lot in life, but you have a truly page turning life. And that is an inspiration for all of us to move forward. Thank you so much for taking the time to
Thank
talk
you,
to us
Emily.
today.
You're
Talk
awesome.
soon.
I appreciate you. Bye.
Bye.